This Eastertide season, we have been exploring what it means to be people of hope. We've affirmed that as followers of the resurrected Christ, we are empowered to live with hope. And we do this by knowing our Good Shepherd, Jesus' voice, and then following him. Well, this morning, I'd like you to consider what a person of hope looks like. How would you recognize a person who walks with hope in their heart? Do they exude a serene confidence? Do they have a calmed and hushed, unflustered spirit? Or is the hope-filled person the active, always in motion church worker who is always involved in service projects, always in a kind of holy blur of volunteerism? Is hope a set of conditions that could be made into a nice saying and hung on a wall, quotes that give us encouragement? Or is hope seen best when we put it into practice out in the nitty-gritty streets of the real world? Well, John 15, our gospel this morning, points out that Jesus is calling us to both, a balance of both. On one hand, as people of hope, we are to remain, to abide, be still and calm, rooted in Jesus, and yet at the same time, we are called to produce fruit, to be active, vibrant, verdant, full of vitality. To be fruitful, though, we will need to be rooted. I love the visual Jesus gave us, abiding. It's not a word we use every day in English, is it? I have heard it used as a parental directive, especially like to teenagers. As long as you live under my roof, you must abide by my rules. Maybe you have heard that. But Jesus means it in a different way. During this intimate talk with his disciples, he is now calling them friends. And he has gathered them around him and seeking to prepare them for the future, their future, because it's his last time with them. It won't be long until he leaves this earth, and he knows the trials that they will face, and he seeks to prepare them, to console them, and at the same time to invite them to enter into a deeper relationship by urging them to abide in him, to stay in place, to endure. Abiding in this sense implies steadfastness, relying on God's presence in and for God's beloved community. For me, Eugene Peterson's translation of the original language brings a sense of settled peace to the turmoil the disciples are experiencing, and it brings hope for us today. Eugene Peterson puts it this way: live in me, make your home in me, and make your home in me as I do in you. Jesus is sharing these words to instill hopefulness. Now, you probably have heard someone tell a child or to tell their spouse or a friend who has been going through a very hard time. You may have heard, or maybe even have said it, hang in there. You might have patted them on the back and said, hang in there. Well, as it turns out, those words are not very helpful to hear, to receive. The person going through this very hard time is probably trying to figure out just how to hang on. And so telling them to hang on is pretty much telling them, you know what, you got this on your own. You're going to do this. Whereas Jesus is offering more. He's about to leave his disciples, and rather than just patting them on the back and say, good luck, you've got this, he is saying, I will be with you. He's acknowledging first the truth with them, that hard times will come, but I will be with you in spirit. So live, abide, find your home in me, and God the grower will sustain you and bring about even greater well-being. Friends, none of us have been created to go through life alone, to figure out life on our own, or to celebrate alone, or to grieve alone. We've been created for community, togetherness, whereas the South Africans say Ubuntu. Maybe you've heard that. I am because you are. We need each other. Many other traditions also in the world promote community support over individuality. And it begins with abiding in the vine, abiding in Jesus. Years ago, I was a part of a group that attended concerts on the lawn. It was in Pennsylvania. It was at a vineyard, and we would bring our picnic baskets and our blankets, and we would place all of this out with all the many other people on the lawn so we could see the bandstand, and then we could view the rows of the beautiful grapevines. It always just was like a contemplative view for me to see the sun just setting on these luscious-looking grapes and the tidy vines. And I got really interested in how do the vineyarders do this. And so I found myself finding books and novels and movies that would tell me more about vineyards. Notice I didn't actually tell how-to books. I had to be in a story that was fun. So I was fascinated by that, and I learned that in a vineyard, the best grapes are produced closest to the central vine. That's where the nutrients are most concentrated. So the lateral branches are trimmed, they're pruned, so that not only the vine produces fruit, but it's the healthiest and the most delicious grape. So hopeful people must stay near closest to Jesus. They are sustained most by staying close to Jesus, placing their trust in Jesus. Because if we attempt to do it on our own, we'll be cut off from the life source. It's just natural. The further you're away, the less you'll be able to receive. Our hopes wane when we're not close to Jesus, and we will bear no fruit when we attempt to be self-reliant. This past Tuesday, during my Tuesdays with Pastor Mary, the little video that you can find on Facebook or in your newsletter, I shared with you Psalm 42, a psalm of lament. I think that many of us are lamenting right now, right? Lamenting that we have to wear a mask, lamenting that we can't sing, lamenting, we can't, there's this numerous things. And there's a glimmer of hope, but we're lamenting. But this psalm is a great example of the psalmist remaining hopeful. If you start reading this psalm, you at first sense that this psalm, the writer of the psalm is very emotional, moaning in fact. And yet, because the psalmist is free to be honest with himself and with God, he is then able to think about those wonderful times he had with God, to remember. And in fact, that honesty with himself, with God, seems to release him to be back on track and abiding with God, the source of all being. To remain connected with God, the source of all being. And so if you read Psalm 42, you will see that theme go up and down, back and forth, where there's a strength, and then there's a dip of sadness. And then there's a strength and a dip of sadness. Sound like life sometimes? And yet he doesn't stay down there because he's able to be free and honest and then reconnect. I invite you to look at Psalm 42. We will go through hard times. Jesus said that, and we all know that. But as we abide, remaining connected to the source, we will have hope, and it will be revived, sustained, and we will be able to produce fruit. Thanks be to God. Amen.